have paradigms and roadblocks that prevent us from excelling, and they can be real or imagined. Welcome to Beyond Bricks, a podcast that will give you the ability to break through those walls. Here's Dr. Nathan Unruh.
Welcome, everyone. You are in for a real treat today. As I get to bring in my guest speaker today, I want to just set this up as this is a gentleman I've been following for many, many years. And I'm so honored and blessed to have him in this conversation. First time I got to talk to him, I got all geared up and was ready to run through a wall. And now I'm competing with him on how many books we can read. And so I'm not going to tell you, Jon, how many that is yet, because I got to catch up. But who I have with me today is Jon Acuff. Jon Acuff is a New York Times bestselling author. He's written 9 books. He is also top 100 leadership speakers named by Inc. He lives in Nashville with his wife, Jenny, and their 2 daughters. And I am so excited to have him at our upcoming event, Brain Spa. So, Jon, thank you for making this time and welcome to this conversation.
I was so looking forward to this based on our last conversation, and I can't wait to share the stage with you. I think it's going to be just a blast. So I know this talk is going to be fun. The event's going to be fun. And I told you when we talked last time, this is the start of a friendship. So I'm excited about that.
I love it. I agree. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off. We're going to get right after it. Okay.
Let's go.
Navigating change. You have really coined this idea of, hey, I'm here to help you finish. You wrote the book Finish. You wrote the book Do Over. You wrote the book Start. You wrote the book All It Takes Is a Goal. Talk to me about this idea of finishing.
Yeah. So what was interesting, when it comes to a new idea, I look for 3 things. I look for personal passion. I got to stay connected to it. You're going to talk about some of these ideas for years and years and years. So the first thing, if you think about a Venn diagram, is I want a personal passion. The second thing is I want a need. I want to say, okay, clients are asking about it. Neighbors are talking about it. I'm hearing about it from friends. And so the third thing is there a spot for me in the marketplace? If I can get those 3 things to overlap, then I have an idea I'm going to spend hours and weeks and months and years talking about. So for me, I wasn't finishing in my own life. I was a great starter, had a hard time finishing. And sometimes culture says things like, the hardest part of any journey is the first step. No, it's not. We have kickoff parties. We have launch parties. I've never been to a middle party. I've never had a manager say, hey, we're at the worst part of the project. Time for middle cake. Like, the start is challenging. The middle and the finish are even harder. So I had a personal connection. I wanted to be a better finisher. The second thing is I asked people, are you good at finishing every goal you start? And everybody universally said, absolutely not. The third thing, I went to the marketplace. And when it comes to books, the marketplace is obvious. It's Amazon. So I went to Amazon, I typed in the word finish, and the only thing that came up was dishwasher detergent. And because our culture is obsessed with the start and we ignore the hard stuff in the middle and the finish. So I wanted to write a book about how do you actually finish the things you care about, because there's so many people with half-written books, half-started businesses. I guarantee people come up to you, and when they hear what you do, they go, oh man, I've always wanted to do something like that. And you go, you can, like, nobody, it's not illegal. Like, people and people show up and help you as you kind of do some brave things, like, and they go, I don't know. And they've got this half-started idea in their heart, in their head. And so I wanted a book that would speak directly to that in a practical way.
I love it. So, one of the things you said in your book that's just stuck with me, an analogy, and this isn't All It Takes Is a Goal book, is the idea of a marathon.
Yeah.
You got people cheering in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like when everybody's out of the gates, right?
Yeah.
And you got people cheering at the end when everybody's coming across the finish line. But who's cheering for you in the middle?
Yeah. Well, and so there's a couple answers to that. One, it's the community you surround yourself with. Part of the reason you go to Brain Spa is because you're going to surround yourself with people that are doing the things you're doing. Like, when you are growing a business, when you are daring to be not normal, because like, we know what normal is. Like, the average American, according to Nielsen ratings, watches 34 hours of TV a week. 34 hours a week. That's almost a 40-hour a week job. So when you dare to be unusual or extraordinary, that could be very lonely. Nobody talks about that. It's a very lonely experience unless you go get community. So who's going to cheer for you in the middle? The community you reach out to. When you go to, like, I'll probably say this from stage at Brain Spa, there's 2 events that happen at every event, the one on stage and the one in the hall. And no offense to any other speaker, I'm a speaker. Usually the one in the hall is even better because you're in real trenches with real people. The second thing is, I tell people this all the time, BYOH, you got to bring your own hype. Like there's going to be moments where the only cheerleader you have is you, and you can't wait for that. You have to stir that up. So there's a lot of things I do in my day to stir up that motivation, to stir up that inspiration, to stir up that hope. If I only wrote books on the days I felt like it, I would have never finished a single book. But the reason I'm working on 10 and 11 is because I BYOH. And then a third thing that I'd say is that I think one of the greatest life hacks in the world is a marriage where you get to be married to your best friend. I think like we don't talk about that in business circles much, but I think if you look at professional athletes and you go, oh, that one has the wife they've known since high school and they're 15 years in or 10 years in and it's stable and they love each other. And like you go, I have a pretty good feeling about that athlete versus the guy who's involved in an article. Anytime, Nathan, you're in an article that involves the phrase outside a club, nothing good has happened. It's never helped some orphans outside a club. It's usually had a fight. And so for me, the big community you surround yourself, how you talk yourself up, and also that, the marriage relationship, the long-term personal relationship is really important for the middle.
Okay. You got two things that I want to pull apart.
Yeah.
And I love the BYOH. I'm going to steal that. So how do you motivate yourself? Who motivates the motivator?
Oh, dude, here's what's funny about me. I have a naturally negative attitude, like a naturally cynical, pessimistic attitude. I just realized over time that the ROI on positivity is way better than negativity.
Yeah.
Like I make more money, I have more friends, I get more opportunities. And so I work really hard to get my attitude up. So for example, today, I got up at 5:50. I wasn't an early morning guy back in the day because I didn't have enough things that got me out of bed. Once you discover some purpose and passion, like it chases you out of bed. I say joy is the best alarm clock. Like joy is the best alarm clock. So I was like, man, I couldn't wait for the day. I got up at 5:50. I did a quiet time, read my Bible, read a book for about 30 minutes, journaled a little bit. And then I did a workout. And while I'm doing the workout, I'm listening to a positive audiobook. So while I'm doing this workout, I'm feeding my body and my head at the same time. And so I have a list of things I'm doing that, by the time I hit like by 8 a.m. where I'm ready to go, I want to run through, like you said, run through a wall because I've been working on that. I've been deliberate about that. I use soundtracks. I mean, if you're watching this on video, like that wall right there is a collection of soundtracks that I review. And so I go, okay, I don't review all of them every day. There's 100 up there. That would be a little compulsive, not helpful. But there's moments where I need to take a quick look up there and go, oh, that's right. I can pine or I can plan. I can pine for how things used to be. It used to be easier, or I can plan. So which is it going to be today? We going to plan in this moment of change, or we going to pine of, oh, it used to be easier, and go, okay, I remember that one. Or the third take is always better. That's to remind myself, don't just do one take. Don't just do two. The third take is better. Don't do shortcuts. Don't cut the corners. Like, a third draft is better. When you really settle into it, it's better. So I do probably, I would say I have maybe a list of 15 to 20 different things that given the day, I'll pull from as here's where my mood is. I need to get it up. Here's where my mood is. I need to get it up. And so I'm really deliberate. And then the people I surround myself with. The people that encourage me, the people that I connect with. I'm pretty deliberate about who's speaking into my life and whose life I'm speaking into.
Yeah. And, as I hear you say that, it's, the phrase that we often talk about is make the routine your reward. And
that's good.
Your routine is those soundtracks. And I'm sure that, are they truthful? Are they helpful? Are they kind? Right?
Yeah. And I love that phrase, make the routine your reward, because once you get into that mode, you wouldn't think about breaking it. It's not like, a habit's working when you miss it, it hurts more. Where you go, oh, I didn't get to work out today. Like I moved my oldest daughter into college yesterday, and I had to tell myself days before, remember, carrying all that stuff is going to be your workout. Like, remember, because we left at 5 a.m. I wasn't going to get up at 4 a.m., be tired for moving her in just so I could check a box. One of the things I say is that a rigid goal is a fragile goal. So I'm flexible with my goals, because if you make your goal, I do this routine at this set time every day, you're doomed. You're doomed. Every day
Yep,
is a little
you're right.
different. So I have to, the older I get, the more I hold two opposite things in my hands at the same time. I'm really detailed and prepared, and I'm really flexible. Those feel opposite some days, but I have to do both, because if I'm only prepared, when something goes awry, it like breaks the whole day. If I'm only flexible, I don't get anything done. Like it's free form. So I have to kind of do both. So for me, I do know that a goal is working or a habit's working, whatever word you want to use, when I do see the routine as a reward, when it doesn't feel like drudgery. Missing it feels like, that's when I go, oh, I didn't get a workout in today. I want to get one in. Like I got to get that mood back up. And it's not me. I don't have to force myself to do it.
Are you still running a lot?
Yeah, I'm trying to. My goal this year is 650 miles.
Wow.
And 450 miles of walking. So I'm hiking a lot. We're doing the rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, me and three dudes. And so I'm
Fun.
now switching into like, I got to do it with a weighted vest. Like the elevation in Nashville, I don't know if you've been to Nashville. It's
Mhm.
400 feet above sea level. So there's
Yeah.
not a lot of opportunities for me as a Nashville guy to get some elevation reps in. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to do stuff like weighted vest and like, so I'm starting to gear up for like some longer
Mhm.
hikes that I'll go do with my wife in prep for
Mhm.
this.
Yeah. Love it. So what the other thing that you said, the third component of those relationships was the spouse.
Yeah,
And I'm glad you brought that up. And I didn't even know that we would get there today, but I want
sure.
to talk about that for a minute because I can't agree with you more. When I look at my clients and over the years, even in my own life, of that relationship is so critical. And I'm always curious why we give the ones we love the most our worst. In
Mhm.
fact, my little boy said to me one day when he was little, he's no longer little, but he says, "Yeah, everyone thinks dad's so nice." Well,
Oh
well, he's
man.
not. He's not. So because I would come home and I'd have
Yeah,
give them my worst, right?
sure.
And so that relationship of being able to really, it's the old saying, the grass is only green where you're watering it.
Yep.
I look at my people that we work with, when the family life is a mess, their business is a mess.
Yeah.
And looking at getting on the same page of roles and in support on the spouse. Tell me how you and Jenny have done that.
I would say slowly. It's been a work in progress. We've been married 23 years, and I think we're still discovering new things about ourselves, which makes marriage really fun. Like we still
Mhm,
surprise each other. I would say would say it's slowly. I mean, but we had to be aligned on big things. So a big thing that we were aligned on is she wanted to work, stay at home with the kids. So
mhm.
when we first got married, she had her master's in construction management from Georgia Tech. She was a unicorn in a male dominated industry and could have really rocketed up her career. But her goal was always, I want to raise our kids. I want to stay home with our kids. So we deliberately set our lives to, can we live on one salary? How do we do that? How do we do that? And then when we had our first kid, we were able to make that transition. But I mean, we cut our salary in half. Obviously, when that happened, we had to be united on that. So I think one of the things we've done is we've tried to say united on big things like that. The second thing is we do use soundtracks in our family a lot. Like I wrote some down the other day. Like one of them is that we say to our kids and ourselves all the time is, there's money on the ground everywhere if you're willing to pick it up. Like there's just money and opportunity everywhere if you're willing to pick it up, because we want our kids to know that, and we want them to have that framework of like, okay, where's an opportunity? What can I do with it? We Another one is we don't show up hungry. That's a soundtrack we say in our family. What does it mean? It means if we go to your house, say you are hosting us, we're spending the weekend with you guys, and we get there at 7 p.m. We would have, unless you said, no, we're doing a dinner. My wife loves doing dinners. Unless that was part of it, we would have stopped an hour before and eaten before we got there, because we don't show up and go, feed us. It's time to feed us. Like that's a micro decision for a macro principle of, think about others, like be respectful of others. So with our kids, we're like, yeah, we don't show up hungry. We don't roll in a hot mess and then go, also, in addition to staying here, we demanded a beautiful meal tonight. Again, unless the host is like, oh, we'd love to do that. So we talk about our soundtracks a lot. We talk about our goals a lot. We did counseling. We've gone to counseling to learn how to talk to each other, learn how to support each other. So we didn't try to like wing it ourselves. And then the other thing I'd say is, we're very deliberate to look ahead and see what kind of life we want. And then what are the decisions we can make that get us there? So we're very deliberate to go, and I love that 70-year-old, like how they're a couple and what they're getting to do and how they're like how their family supports each other and how their kids love each other. And like a practical example that would be, we've had several people we know who are 15 years ahead of us who were deliberate about building a house, where a house or like a vacation spot where the kids wanted to come back to. They wanted to come back to it. And especially when they're young and they're young married and they don't have any money. And it was a spot where they wanted to return. So we financially aimed toward that. Like, man, it'd be great when we're 65, if we're fortunate enough to have grandkids, that we have a mountain house where they would love to come to and they'd vacation there and they would want to spend time with us. And that takes a lot of relational equity along the way, but it also takes financial planning. It also takes dream casting with each other. So we talk a lot about where do we want to be in the future and what are the decisions we make today that'll help us get there.
Yeah. So for all the listeners there, you got to be intentional. That's what I'm hearing. Same thing in my own life.
Nothing awesome happens accidentally. I say that all the time.
Never.
Nothing awesome. I've never met somebody who said, I accidentally got in shape. I was just binge watching Netflix. Next thing I knew, I was doing burpees. Like, I don't even know how I got off the couch. Nothing. And I think here's the thing, Nathan, one of the reasons I really like you is I know you share the stuff you're doing with people. I don't like when successful people pretend they're not doing 100 things and then they go, no, it's just kind of like, it just happens. Like one of my current pet peeves right now is successful men and women who are in their 40s and 50s who are telling men and women in their 20s, you need to worry about work-life balance. No, you don't. Because that successful person you're talking to was building in their 20s. They weren't going, I'm 27. I got to really focus on work life. No, that's a building decade. You got to build and build and build. Like, anybody who's successful in their mid-50s who's telling you that you're 27, you should work less and focus more on work-life balance is not telling you the truth about how they got where they are.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get me going now because it's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. Drives me bonkers.
To the point, I wrote a book called The One Number Will Transform Your Life. It's a short, little, tiny book. And it's like, look at all 7 areas of your life and measure them every 90 days. Because you know as well as I do, life ebbs and flows. Sometimes my physical health needs a little more attention. Sometimes my financial health needs a little more attention. Sometimes my spiritual health needs more attention. But I've never been here.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, right? Sometimes I got to pay attention to my family more.
Oh, 100. Well, and it's seasonal. That's the other thing. It ebbs and flows in seasons. So like this week, for instance, I'm moving my youngest daughter into college. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Are you an empty nester?
Yeah. Empty nester Friday morning or Thursday night, really, technically. So like, I know this week's not going to be like last week. This week, the family knob is getting turned up to an 11. So it would be crazy if I went into this week going, I'm going to crush these work projects. That would cause so much frustration. I'd probably be mentally absent during the move-in because I'd be thinking about work. But I know that because I've looked ahead on my schedule and gone, oh, I see this coming up in 2 weeks. I better backfill and get a lot of work done these weeks leading up because I want to be all in on move-in day. So, but that again, that comes back to the word you said, intentionality.
Yeah. Yeah. Balance is a myth, but that's not popular for us to say.
No, dude, it's not.
This is not popular.
It's not,
popular,
but
it's reality.
Well, fine. Then just don't, like, you can't have both. You can't go, I want this, like, I want to work 20 hours a week, but I would also like, to not have debt, or I would also like to have I want to live somewhere where I can walk to eat. That's amazing. Do you know what that requires? Capital. And like, I want you to have both. And it's not one or the other. Like, I have a awesome marriage. I have awesome kids. Like, there's ways to have a lot of things. There are, but there's also like, could I maybe have a bigger platform if I did 200 speaking gigs a year? Maybe, but I sure wouldn't know my kids. Like, I sure wouldn't know my wife. Like 200 gigs a year for me is divorce city. Like, it just is. Like, that's just math. That's not even a relational thing. That's just like, if we spend 200 nights apart every year, we don't know each other. We're teammates in like this thing called the Acuff family, but we certainly don't know each other. So you're always Sacrifice. Let's just list words nobody likes, but are actually true. Balance. There's no balance. Sacrifices. It does require sacrifice. Like hard work works. Like, we're saying all the swears right now, but I don't, if you want the thing, I'll tell you how to get the thing. But if you can't not do the work and then also want the thing, that is the recipe for a miserable life.
Yeah. John, you know why they call it work?
Why?
Because it works.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
single
Yeah,
time.
yeah. The law of the harvest, like reap and sow. Who go figure. If I call 20 cold call prospects, I sell. If I don't, I don't sell. It's unfortunate.
Okay, you told a story in your book about at one point in time, and I think the exact number is that you had like 80 gigs a year in this year, and you would leave and you were very apologetic.
Oh yeah.
You were apologetic to your girls, you were apologetic to your wife, until your wife kind of said, "Hey, you're not helping right now."
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Yeah. So what happened was when I had a traditional job, I didn't travel at all. I was a senior content designer. So I was a copywriter in essence for big companies like Home Depot, Staples, Bose. Felt very grateful for those opportunities, but they didn't require any travel. Nobody's ever like, we got to get this copywriter to Spokane, Washington, stat. Like you do your job in your cubicle, you never travel. When I started my own company, I became a public speaker. There was a lot more travel. So if I would do 50 events a year, which is about my number, I'd be gone 80 nights a year. And so I felt tremendous shame and guilt about that. A lot of parenting guilt where I was like, I'm leaving my kids. And I would do these long, elaborate goodbyes where it'd be like, I'm going to be gone for 3 sleeps, like light a candle for me in the window. Like it was so dramatic. And kids don't understand the concept of time. So telling them 3 sleeps doesn't help. Like they don't I don't even know what that means. So finally my wife pulled me aside and she was like, look, number one, you're making this really hard for me because you're teaching your kids sadness. They don't even know to be sad. Kids with mirror neurons will mirror what you tell them. So when I go, hey, me leaving is a tremendous, terrible thing. It's the worst. My job is the worst. Travel's the worst. Oh, like I know you're enjoying cartoons, but I'd like you to feel really sad. Second thing she said, you're refusing to process your own shame and guilt and you're just passing it off to them. So you're asking them to deal with it, not you. And third, she said, we want you to do your job. Like this is a family effort. We love that you're doing something you love. Like this is what you were built for. We're here to support that. The big thing too is when you demonize work for 18 years with your kids. I hate my job. I wish I didn't have to travel, whatever it is. Don't be surprised when they graduate high school and don't want to get a job. Of course they don't want a job. You just told them for 18 years, jobs are the worst. Like jobs are. So instead, Jenny said, when you leave, let's celebrate it. Like when you leave, it's a good thing. When you leave and like, let's tie it to other stuff. So like when we would be at Disney, I'd go, hey, remember that time I missed that weekend because I was in Oklahoma and I was working with that client? This is connected to our ability to go to Disney. Like like all these things are connected. Like all these, one of the things we say in our family is money doesn't buy happiness, but it does fix a lot of problems. Like it does fix a lot of problems. And there's been times when we've seen folks go through health stuff and they didn't have the finances, or like right now, one of the largest GoFundMe's is funerals, which is devastating, dude. Imagine you don't have the money for the funeral. And the first thing the remaining family has to do is go do a Kickstarter to pay for your funeral. Like in the middle of grieving, they then have to go try to that's devastating. And so we'll say, money doesn't buy happiness, but it fixes a lot of problems. You can do a lot of fun stuff with it. And you can help a lot of people. Like you can ball out on some nonprofit that like you're about to change their whole year with your generosity, and then hundreds of lives you don't even know. So that reframed it. And the soundtrack we started to say was, I don't have room in my suitcase for shame. There's no room in my suitcase for shame. And then I started to tell other traveling parents that too. And it helped them go, oh, you're right. Like I have been doing that. And I have been putting that pressure on my spouse and my kids. And so that one became really helpful for a lot of people.
Well, and again, as you listen to this, listen to that dance you and your wife did, your wife helping you see that, like, and then helping your kids. I remember my wife, when my kids were young, she used to tell my kids that, because daddy couldn't be at every ball game. I couldn't be at every single one. And she would say, daddy's helping fix people's owies.
Yeah.
Right. So they started to get that, right? Yeah.
Well, and also it's cultural pressure too. Like our neighborhood swim team, The
Yeah.
swim meets are during the day, during the week. In Atlanta, they're at night so that working parents can come. In Nashville, they go, hey, the swim meets from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. And if you're a working parent, dude, like, how do you go? Like, and if you've got 8 vacation days a year, like, that's the tension of working parents. So, like, I wanted to teach my kids to love what they do, because they're gonna do something someday, and I wanted to release myself from that shame, and I wanted to give working parents, some hope and truth about that, because they've got a hard thing to do. It's hard to do this. Like, it's challenging, but it's worth it. And the other
Totally.
thing you mentioned, my wife and I, we had to have a mature enough relationship where she had the space to say that, and I had the ears to hear that. Which, first year of marriage, that would have been an argument. I would have been like, "What are you talking about?" But like, we had grown as a married couple where I always joke that my goal in marriage is to shorten the distance between when she tells me something that is true and I believe it. Like, when we first got married, she'd go like, yeah, I don't think that chapter was good. I'd be like, like a grumpy week. Now it's about an hour. Like, she says something sucks in the living room after reading it. I go upstairs. I'm like, what does she know? What does she talk about? And I come back down an hour later. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. You were right. That was really good feedback. When you said it, I was afraid that I was out of words. Those are the last words I had. And so I was scared that I didn't have any words, and I reacted in anger. I'm sorry. Like, and so like, that's part of marriage too.
It makes me laugh because for years I would pout.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah,
for like
totally.
3 days, like,
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
her life miserable because I didn't
Yeah.
like what she had
So
to say.
dumb. So
Now, but I
dumb.
like but here's the deal. The reality is, to say I still don't do it once in a while, that would be a lie.
Oh yeah, of course.
To shorten the distance is the key for us as well.
Oh yeah.
So I
Like, I'm
love how you
23
said
years
that.
in. Yeah. I'm shortening the distance. it'd be fun to be on podcast and be like, we haven't had an argument in 17 years. I don't know what
Yeah.
these people are doing in their terrible marriages, but ours
Yeah.
is perfect. But that's not the reality.
Yeah. 17 minutes, maybe.
Yeah. I was about to say, when you're out of town.
I love it. Okay. So I'm going to dock the boat here, but I want you to finish with this. I know you're going to be at Brain Spa, and we're so excited for you to be there. I want you to just prep it a little bit on soundtracks. I mean, we've mentioned soundtracks a number of times. And for those of you who have not purchased his book on soundtracks or had a chance to listen to it or read it, I highly encourage you to do so. I've been through it numerous times over the years, and I love it. And I always got to be reminded of it. And I would contend to this: that book, Soundtracks, is the key to your success. Your success in your business, your success with your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your spouse. Mindset is everything. And the way that Jon has crafted this message is powerful. So I just want you to speak to that just for a moment on, just don't give them all of it about soundtracks, but what can they expect when they come hear you in Sioux Falls?
Yeah. So the challenge with mindset as a topic is, when you talk about it, it automatically gets fuzzy and holistic. It gets really like ethereal, and like, you're going to have to go on a 90-day silent retreat, and like, you can never use warm water again. Like, it gets really kind of up in the air. And I wanted to figure out, are there some simple steps I can do to change my soundtracks? I had a negative mindset. I knew that a positive was better. I didn't like the stories I was telling myself about myself. I could see them impacting other relationships. And so I wanted to say, are there some tactical ways I can change my mindset in my own life, in my family's life, in my corporate life? That's what's fun about this topic, is that there's some topics you hear and they're narrow and they really apply to how you lead at work. Or there's some topics you hear and you go, this is exactly a family topic. But soundtracks is an everything topic, meaning families have soundtracks, couples have soundtracks, companies have soundtracks. I'll give you an example of one that I heard just the other day. I spoke to a big real estate company, and about a month after I was there, somebody shared a screenshot from their community chat. So a bunch of real estate agents, and one said, somebody encouraged me to call through my database, but I said, nobody answers the phones anymore. Nobody, this generation only texts, nobody answers the phones anymore. He said, but I realized that was a broken soundtrack. So I decided to change it into, people answer the phones if I call. People answer the phone. Like, he wrote some new soundtracks. Then he turned that into some actions, and then he had 4 million pending. And he said, it blew me away what happened. But all it took was that one broken soundtrack to kind of mess him up and go, nobody answers the phones anymore. Nobody answers the phones anymore. And he was believing that. And then his actions were reflecting that. He wasn't calling anybody. So a lot of the time, if you can get at the root of that little soundtrack, and again, he didn't change it into something super creative. You don't have to be a writer to come up with a new one. All he came up with is a couple like, I'm going to call people. I'm going to try the phones. Is that true that nobody answers the phone? And he said it changed his entire year as a real estate agent. So that's what's fun about mindset is when you can find practical ways to live it out, you really get to see a lot of life change.
Yeah. And you and I've talked about this before the last time we chatted. And even as I look at your room right now and you turn the screen to your whiteboard and I see these cars behind you, and I know there's a pine cone that's sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
All of those
Right
things
there. There's the pine
yeah.
cone.
So they represent symbols. Talk about symbols just for a moment.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in how can I make it easy? Like I think we tend to complicate life and make it harder than it needs to be. So when I have when I have a soundtrack I'm trying to learn and remember, I'll tie it to a symbol because symbols make things easy to remember. And I'll see it and I can often carry it with me. I mean, there's a reason that, my favorite symbol that's ever been created because it illustrates the point. A great symbol is personal, it's visible, and it's easy, it's simple. So my favorite example is the Nike Live Strong bracelets because they were always personal. You never met somebody who said, "Oh, I wear this because I hate diseases." It's just I wear disease jewelry. I have an eczema necklace too because I hate eczema. Like, no, they would say, "My uncle died of prostate cancer. My mom had breast cancer." It was always personal. Second thing, it was visible. It was bright yellow. Like they could have made it flesh. They could have made it gray. They didn't. They said, "Here it is, here it is, here it is." And the third one is it was easy to use. Nobody was confused. Like you put the arm through the whole part. It was really, really easy. So what I encourage people to do is when you've got a symbol, like when you've got a soundtrack that's new that you're trying to remember, make it easy on yourself and tie it to a symbol. Be able to say, one woman said, "I'm working on becoming a doctor. So I got a piece of finish line tape and I wrote Dr. Jill on it." And every time I saw that, I said, there's a finish line in this process. It's hard to become a doctor. There is a finish line. I'm going to be Dr. Jill. I'm going to be Dr. Jill. She saw that 100 times a day. It can be picking up a rock. Another person I talked to picked up a rock from the top of a tough climb because they wanted to remember there's beauty at the top. The climb is worth it. And it was just a rock on their desk. And it might not mean anything to anybody else, but to her, it was a reminder of like, oh no, that like I can do hard things. So that's what I love about a symbol is, and what's fun is that people listening to this, people that come to Brain Spa probably already have a bunch of them. They just don't even realize it. So the shelves behind you are, full of symbols. The shelves behind me are full of symbols. I guarantee your fridge or your desk at work is full of symbols. And they were accidentally created. Just imagine what happens when you create them on purpose, which comes back to that intentionality.
What are the cars?
Oh, the Lego sets?
Oh, are those all Legos? Those cars?
Those are all Legos. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah. So the Lego for me, here's why I talk about this. I'll talk about this in my speech. I love putting together Lego sets because it quiets my brain. It quiets my brain. And I'll tell this full story in the speech. But what I realized was I had some broken soundtracks around sales. When I started my own business, I was suddenly in sales. I'd never been in sales before. I didn't know anything about it. And I had broken soundtracks like, if you keep bothering people with your product, they'll be bothered. They'll be frustrated. If you keep talking about it, you'll be too self-promotional. And I realized one Christmas, I got 6 Lego catalogs in the mail, but I didn't mind because I love doing Lego. So I wrote myself a new soundtrack for sales, which is I'm somebody's Lego. If I do my job well, they're excited to hear from me. If I do my job well, they're excited to find out I have a bunch of books or a podcast of my own called All It Takes Is a Goal. So that changed my framework of sales from broken soundtrack, you're bothering people by talking about your thing, to positive soundtrack of like, no, I got something they're going to love. The right people are going to love this. And if I do a good job meeting their needs, they're going to really love this. I'm somebody's Lego. So that's that. Every time I see the Lego says, I'm like, oh, that's right. Let me get at it. But it's also a great reminder for me that it's, it's okay to need new ways to fix broken soundtracks about parts of your business. I looked at that and said, I want to do better at this. I'm going to need some soundtracks. I'm going to have to turn those into actions. What do I do?
I love it. I love it. I'm glad I asked. Okay. So how does everybody get, jonacuff.com? I know that's there. Your books that you can buy on Audible, you can buy on Amazon or buy them from your website, right?
Yeah, so you can get signed copies at jonacuff.com. Copies are for sale everywhere books are sold. The audio, I read the audio, and there's always bonus content. I
Yeah.
learned a few years ago that that was just a fun thing to do. And I'm an audio guy myself. I mentioned today, like, when I'm walking around the neighborhood, when I'm running, I'm listening to audio. So I'm a big
Yep.
audio guy myself. So if you're an audio person, like, check out the audio books. And then Instagram, Jon Acuff, JONACUFF.
Yeah. And I highly recommend, say your podcast one more time. All it takes is a goal.
Yeah, it's
Correct?
called All It Takes Is a Goal, and I interview people about the goals they're working on. If you're going to start with an episode, I think the Greg Sankey episode is really fun. He's the SEC commissioner. I mean, football, not finances. He was fascinating. And then Colleen Berry was one of the first ones too. She was a secretary who became the CEO of her company by changing her soundtracks, and she was a great conversation too.
Love it. Well, Jon, thank you for this time. Can't wait to see
Yeah.
you here real soon. This is just always just a true pleasure, and
I
so
can't
proud
wait.
of
It's
you,
going to
what
be
you're
here
doing.
before you know it.
So yeah,
It's going to be here soon.
appreciate it. Thanks so much for
Thanks for
today.
having me.
You bet.